Hello and welcome to Pseudocode. This video onwards, we are going to start our journey of design patterns. And before I go into the details of types of design patterns and we start looking at different class diagrams and code, let's first try to understand why there are design patterns, why do we study them, what is the use of design patterns, why are they so popular, and what actually every design pattern entails. So let's get started. Even though there are different techniques for object-oriented modeling like UML diagrams, concept of classes and objects, and there are different principles like solid principles which we have discussed. If you have not watched those videos, please go and check them out. Even though these principles exist, even though there are so many guidelines and techniques, still it is not possible to model the real world in terms of objects and classes. There are some problems which cannot actually directly be modeled. There are also some scenarios which do not exist in real world but have to be solved in code. In those cases, there are different set of problems that occur, and there are certain solutions to those problems which have been solved in different complex object oriented problems. Such problems occur in the world of object oriented software design over and over again, and there are some solutions in order to solve those problems, and those solutions are very definite. So since we do not have to reinvent the wheel, and since all those problems have been faced by expert designers and software developers previously, they have come up with different patterns using which they have solved those problems, and those solutions have been robust over time. They have proven their worth over time, and hence we study these design patterns. Using these design patterns, we can actually solve the complex and classic problems in software world, and we don't have to go looking for new solutions because these are tried and tested solutions, tried and tested patterns which have been used and have proven their worth over time. If I have to pick up the definition of a design pattern from a book which I have linked in the description, the definition of design pattern goes something like this. Each pattern describes a problem that occurs over and over multiple times in our environment, and core of the solution to that problem that you can use a million times without ever doing it same way twice. Now, what does this mean? This means that every pattern that we're going to study is going to describe a problem and the solution, the core part of the solution to that problem using that pattern. But the implementation of that pattern by you or by someone else for that similar kind of problem is not going to be the same. You will use that pattern because, as the name itself suggests, it's a pattern, it's a template. You're going to use that pattern, you're going to use that pattern to identify the problem, to identify the core way of solving that problem, but your implementation might vary depending on the language, depending on the context, depending on the domain of the problem, and hence one design pattern can be implemented in different ways in order to solve similar problems, but the implementation of those patterns can or cannot be same. Again, going by the definition of the design patterns by the book, any pattern consists of four parts: the pattern name itself, the problem, the solution to that problem, and the consequences of using that pattern. Let's see what each of these means. The pattern or the pattern name itself actually gives you an idea about the problem, what that pattern is going to solve, or how that particular problem is solved using that pattern. When you hear names like factory pattern or adapter pattern or command of chain pattern, you get an idea from the name about the kind of problem this pattern might be solving. Also, it's a good idea to have the name for a pattern so that you can actually communicate with your peers, your other developers, and other stakeholders in an effective way. If they also understand the same pattern that you're talking about, you can actually use the name of that pattern in order to ease your communication. For example, many of us have been using different design patterns. I'm also among one of them, that we have been using different design patterns, but we don't know the name for it yet. And if someone asks that same thing in an interview or in a conversation, we just don't know the name. It might sound very trivial to not remember the names of patterns, but actually, if you know the names of the patterns that you're using, or that using those patterns if you're solving the problems, it makes it much easier for you to communicate with others and also to provide solution to others. So the pattern name just gives you a vocabulary and a common ground to stand on while carrying out the technical discussions. The next part of the design pattern is the problem itself. The pattern actually describes the problem it is going to solve. This whole idea comes from one of the books which has been written about the towns and cities, the structuring of towns and cities. If you think about it, all the towns and cities have similar kind of problems. How the water flow will be taken care of, how the garbage will be taken care of, how the traffic of the city will be designed so that people can move from one part of the city to another. And all those problems have similar kind of solutions. We all have flyovers and signals in our cities. We all have garbage collector trucks in our cities. We all have an underlying sewage system in the cities, right? So design pattern also describes the kind of problem that we are solving, and then there is a solution to the problem, which brings us to the third part of the pattern, the solution itself. If you think about it, for any city, the straightforward solution to control the traffic is traffic signals. A straightforward solution to control the speed of the vehicles are the speed breakers. If a city wants to be green and environmental friendly and it wants to reduce number of vehicles on the road, there are solutions like public transport, which includes metros, buses, etc. Similarly, the pattern describes the problem and the solution. The problem in the example that we're talking about is moving of people from one place to another without harming the environment, and the solution is public transport. The problem is controlling the accidents in the city, controlling the speed of the vehicles, and the answer is speed breaker. Similarly, every design pattern which is describing a problem will describe a solution to that problem also, that you can go and use in your code base or in your design. You can map actually the problem to the problem and solution to the solution. And obviously the last part is the consequences. If you're going to apply a design pattern, obviously there are going to be the pro, and the basic pro is that you get a solution to the problem that you're solving. But there are also going to be cons of using certain design patterns. That also we will study with each design pattern, that where are the situations where it is a good idea to use a pattern, and where are the situations where it is not a good idea to use such a pattern and just go with the naive way or the direct way of solving that problem. Again, if we talk about the example of cities, true, if you build roads and good traffic signals and good traffic control system in the city, it allows people to travel from one place to another. But the obvious con is that you end up with a lot of people emitting a lot of CO2 in the environment because they have their personal vehicles. Then you come up with another solution like public transport. But then again, you have to care about the security of the public transport and running cost of the public transport, so that the government does not incur all the losses while giving a reasonable option to the citizens of that particular city. So naturally, any design pattern that you're using, it is going to have some consequences, some pros and cons, and weighing these pros and cons in order to make a decision whether you should apply that design pattern or not is one of the very important part of your decision making, of your design decision making. And hence I am talking about the structure of design pattern here. Before we go ahead and learn the actual design patterns, these are the things that we have to keep in mind while learning and applying those patterns. So this was the brief definition of what design patterns entail, why we study design patterns, and how can we use design patterns so that they are useful to us and are not creating any negative impact on the design that we are creating. In the next video, we are going to talk about the organization of different design patterns and the types of design patterns. Till then, take care. See you in the next video.